Welcome, everyone. My name is April Smith, and I serve as the Education Coordinator here at NAFA. We're thrilled to have you join us for the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series. Before we get started with today's session, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to keep everything running smoothly. This session is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be available on the NAFA website in the coming days. All attendees are currently muted to minimize background noise. However, we highly encourage your participation. Please feel free to submit your questions or share comments using the chat and Q&A features located in your Zoom toolbar. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to the NAFA team using the chat feature. And now, to officially kick things off, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to our moderator, Heather Brutz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Brutz. I am the Transportation Program Director for the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. We are a public service center based out of the College of Engineering at NC State University. And we have been partnering with NAFA in working together on the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series for a number of years now. And very pleased to go and bring you today's webinar, which is free technical assistance tools for fleets. And so did want to also give a thank you to our sponsor, EV Urged. Encourage you to check out their website. Coming up is the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference. It'll be August 25th through 27th in Winston-Salem at the Benton Convention Center. Early bird ends tomorrow on 7/11 and for general admission. That said, if you are listening to this webinar, there's a decent chance you are a NAFA member, and NAFA members are able to go and get a special price of $299, and that price is available until August 1st. And you can also see that we have some student pricing available, and for groups of 3 or more, we also have group pricing available. And so I encourage you to come to the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo. It is the premier clean transportation conference in the southeastern United States. And so here is an overview of some of the topics that we're going to cover in our different tracks. These are our breakout sessions that we're going to be covering this year. And our keynote speakers are Keith Kerman from New York City, Kelly Regan from the city of Columbus, Boris Court-Packard from FedEx, Jennifer Weaver from the Clean Fuels Alliance, and Steve Saltzgiver from RTA, and Monty McLeod from Sharp Energy. And so it's going to be a really exciting conference. And in terms of other things related to NAFA at the conference, NAFA will be doing a pre-conference event on they'll be hosting a workshop on the NAFA Sustainable Fleet Management Certificate. This pre-conference event, there is an additional charge for this. It costs $240. It's great training to go and really boost up your skills as a fleet manager. And so I do encourage you to do that. Other things that we are doing together with NAFA at the conference, we will continue to host the Green Fleet Awards and announce the Green Fleet Award winners at the conference. And so that will happen on the first day. And so, yeah, very excited to work with NAFA on those parts of the conference. And I hope that you guys can join us there in Winston-Salem, August 25th through 27th. Moving on to the meat of our webinar. And so here are our speakers. We're going to start off with Brian Lips, who is the Senior Project Manager for the Policy and Markets program at the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. Then we will have Emily Pape, who is a Program Manager from the Electrification Coalition, speak. And then we will have Andy Burnham, who is a principal environmental scientist from Argonne National Laboratory, speak. So Brian's going to be talking about a program called the Charging Smart program that provides free technical assistance. Emily Pape is going to be talking about the Drive tool that the Electrification Coalition has available. And Andy Burnham is going to be talking about the A-Fleet tool available from Argonne National Laboratory. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
All right. Thanks for that introduction, Heather, and hello to all of you. Like Heather said, I'm here to share with you some information about a DOE-sponsored program that may be of interest to the fleet audience, particularly publicly owned fleets, and it's the Charging Smart program. Next slide, please. But first, a bit about my organization and Heather's organization. The North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center at NC State is a public service center, and we work to advance a sustainable energy economy by educating, demonstrating, and providing support for clean energy technologies, practices, and policies. We've been around for about 35 years now and have evolved our work as the industry itself has evolved. Our director likes to say that we do the work needed by the industry that no one else has been able to find a business model for. And then once a business model exists, we step aside and let the private sector take over that aspect and then look for other gaps that we can fill. Most of our work is grant funded, with much of that coming from the federal government. We have several focus areas within the center, including industrial efficiency, training and workforce development, clean transportation, which is where Heather is situated, and policies and markets, which is where I operate. Next slide. So Charging Smart is a relatively new program, again, funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, and the center here is a partner on the project. Charging Smart at its core is a designation program for local governments to signal their support for EVs and the wider charging industry. As a partner on the project, my colleagues and I are providing free technical assistance to local governments all across the Southeast to help them take specific actions to improve the environment for EV charging within their jurisdictions, and then achieve recognition for those actions. Next slide. The program is modeled after the SolSmart program, if anyone's familiar with that. It's a similar program, but for solar energy. While Charging Smart is relatively new, SolSmart has been around for about 10 years or so. And to date, more than 500 communities across the country have met the requisite criteria to be designated a SolSmart community. This includes local governments in 43 states, plus DC and the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. So now more than 1 in 3 U.S. residents live in a SolSmart designated community. These are communities that have taken specific actions to improve their permitting and zoning processes and their own internal operations to make it easier for their residents to go solar. So this is the type of penetration we hope to achieve with the Charging Smart program. Next slide. And there's one more of these types of programs, Distributed Wind Smart. All three of these are marketed together under the banner Energy Ready. If you'd like to know more about any of these programs, please visit energy-ready.org, or you can scan the QR code here. Next slide. So the Charging Smart program, funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, is led by IREC. That's the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And there's a lot of other partners on the project, including a number of clean cities, as well as my organization, which are all separately working with communities throughout the country to help them achieve designation under the Charging Smart program. Next slide. We also have some industry advisory partners, including the Edison Electric Institute, which is the trade association for the investor-owned utilities in the U.S. Also one specific utility, Dominion Energy, and a few charging providers. Now, together, we all created the criteria for the Charging Smart program, which consists of roughly 150 criteria. That's 150 discrete actions a local government could take to become a more welcoming environment for EV charging. Next slide. Each of these criteria is worth a different number of points, ranging from 5 points to 20 points. And depending on how many points a city scores, in addition to meeting some mandatory criteria, they can be designated either bronze, silver, or gold under the Charging Smart program. Next slide. So these 150 criteria are organized into 6 different categories. There's planning, which includes things like addressing EVs in a comprehensive plan or a city's functional plan. There's regulation, which deals with issues around permitting and zoning. Utility engagement, which encourages local governments to work with their local utility to discuss EV collaboration opportunities. And then the category that might be most pertinent to this group is government operations, which gets into the city fleet and public charging. Some of the criteria within this category include providing fleet operators and maintenance staff with opportunities to test drive EVs, adopting EV conversion goals for the municipal fleet, electrifying at least one light-duty vehicle in the city's fleet, or electrifying one medium or heavy-duty vehicle in the fleet, offering training on EV charger use and safety to city staff, and conducting fleet analyses. Next slide. So the program is really designed for bronze to be pretty achievable by most local governments, really of any size. It requires a total of 80 points, which includes some specific criteria a local government must achieve. First, they must review their zoning requirements and identify any barriers to EV charging within their zoning rules. At this level, we don't ask that they change their zoning rules. We just want them to review those zoning codes so that they can know how they might consider improving them in the future based on vetted best practices provided by the Charging Smart program. We also require them to adopt a standard EV charging infrastructure permit application process, as well as charging infrastructure permitting checklists. Just making these relatively simple administrative changes can really go a long way to easing the burden for homeowners, businesses, and public charging providers, as well as fleet operators to install charging infrastructure. Sometimes it can be hard to identify what the exact permitting process is within a city, and it may require calls or visits with permitting administrators just to know what that process is. So by making these simple changes, it really can answer a lot of questions automatically. And then we also require all bronze recipients to meet with their utility to discuss EV collaboration opportunities. And then they also have to earn 10 points specifically from the planning category, 15 points from the education incentive category, and then 20 additional points from any of the other categories. Next slide. Now, moving up to silver, there are more required actions and additional specific required criteria, one of which is to complete an initial fleet analysis, which is in the government operations category. Local governments can satisfy this requirement by using the Drive tool, which Emily will be sharing with us in just a little bit. Next slide. And then gold designation requires even more points, plus a comprehensive municipal fleet analysis, as well as some other specific actions. Next slide. So what are the benefits of charging smart? Well, a lot of local governments may aspire to be EV friendly and want to have the appearance of being ahead of the curve or future looking, but what exactly should they do? How can they make themselves more EV friendly? Well, here's a playbook with 150 discrete actions they can take. And if a local government is especially interested in modifying their zoning code to be more inclusive to EV charging, well, we can save your staff lots of time by providing specific best practices and examples of what other cities have done, saving the local government a lot of staff time having to do that research on its own. Also, well, you can see the slide was created back in 2024 when there was still a lot of federal funding flowing down to the states to install chargers. It's a different environment now, and one in which local communities will want to attract private funding to build out a charging network. All other things being equal, one of the charging providers on our advisory panel would be more likely to invest their private dollars in a charging smart community that has already done all this work to streamline its permitting process and rewrite its zoning rules than it would be to install chargers in a nearby community that has not already taken those steps. And at the end of the day, this is all about removing unnecessary barriers and clearing up uncertainty to make it easier and less expensive to install charging infrastructure and ultimately expand the EV market. And even if a community does not have many EVs on the road today, it could tomorrow. And in a world where local communities are all competing for tourism dollars, it certainly won't hurt a community to have amenities available for potential EV driving tourists. Next slide. So navigating the program can be a bit challenging, which is why my team and other Charging Smart partners are providing this technical assistance to help identify the best pathway for a community to achieve designation based on their own unique situation as well as their goals. We can help a community wade through the 150 criteria, sharing best practices, model language, and additional resources to help them meet that criteria and nudge their community closer towards EV friendliness. Our process so far has been based on a cohort model. We are currently working with a cohort of 8 local governments in North Carolina. We are hoping to have all these communities applying for designation by the end of the month, or the end of next month, rather, at which point we plan to launch another cohort, including communities from across the Southeast. And our project partners in the program are also running their own cohorts throughout the other parts of the country and recruiting new communities for new cohorts. Next slide. What else can I say? Charging Smart provides an opportunity for communities to get in the news and highlight their accomplishments. We and the other project partners can help them amplify that message, spreading the good news about what this city has accomplished and how this community is now a real leader and open for EV charging business. Next slide. So if a community is interested in the program, getting involved is really simple. There's no cost to a local government. They just need to submit a commitment letter and complete a self-assessment. And then the community can receive free technical assistance from us or one of our project partners. To learn more, you can go to the website listed here or scan that QR code. Next slide. So that's it. My email address is here. If you happen to reside in the Southeast and work for a local government or know people who work for a local government, feel free to share my contact information. Like I said, we're wrapping up work on our current cohort, and we do anticipate all of them achieving designation in the next month or two. And then we're planning to recruit another cohort of communities to work with in this fall. If you're outside the Southeast, feel free to go to the Charging Smart website and you can request technical assistance from one of the other providers, or you can reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with whoever's in your area. And with that, I will pass the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And so I think we're going to move on to Emily Pape from the Electrification Coalition.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Heather. Hi, everybody. Like Heather said earlier, my name is Emily Pape, and I'm a program manager with the Electrification Coalition. And I'm excited to be here today to speak with you all about our dashboard for rapid vehicle electrification, Drive Tool for short, kind of a backronym thing going on there, but we really think this is a great tool, and I'm excited to share it with you. Next slide. So here's kind of just an outline of what we're going to talk about today. I'll talk a bit about us over here at the EC. We'll do an overview of the Drive tool itself, some of its features and use cases, ways it's been applied, and then finally a demonstration. Next slide. So about us at the EC, we are aiming to electrify transportation for our economic and national security. So we're nonpartisan. We are a nonprofit, and we develop and implement a really broad set of strategies to facilitate the widespread adoption of EVs in order to overcome the economic, public health, and national security challenges that really stem from America's dependence on oil. Next. As you can see, we are a nationwide organization. We have some specific focus in the Midwest and the Southeast, but we have staff and programs all across the country. I personally am based in the Bay Area in California. Next. We work in a wide variety of areas, again, all across the United States, including state and federal policy, charging infrastructure expansion, port and freight electrification, and fleet electrification, which is especially pertinent today. Next slide. Okay, on to the Drive tool. Next. So the Drive tool was created by us and our friends at Atlas Public Policy as a free total cost of ownership tool for fleet operators. So anyone can go online to our website, and download it, and use it. Total cost of ownership is a term that takes into account all the costs throughout a vehicle's life, not just the upfront purchase price. So it also includes maintenance, fuel costs, things like that. Using data from VINs, average annual vehicle miles traveled, and vehicle service life, or remaining years of use in the fleet for each vehicle, the tool can provide a variety of uses, including limiting the amount of time and cost that would go into a standard fleet analysis, since that can be kind of expensive, take a long time, and maybe doesn't leave you with a report that's super easy to interpret. It can also provide total cost of ownership analysis and other data pretty quickly in a matter of minutes. And it can integrate several different variables, including different fuel costs, purchase prices, incentives that are available, infrastructure, insurance costs. The list goes on. Okay, next slide. This is a snapshot of the results dashboard. So you can see here, it lets you know exactly how many vehicles in your fleet you would see cost savings with, ones that you see cost parity if you replace with an EV, and then ones that maybe aren't ready to be swapped over for an EV just yet. And it also shows you the top 5 vehicles to procure in your fleet, where you would see the most cost savings if you were to switch to an EV. And I'll talk a little bit more about the results in a moment, but this is just the snapshot of the summary page of that dashboard. Next slide. Okay, so features, operations, and use cases. Next. So there are customizable results for each vehicle in your fleet, and these include breakdown of total cost of ownership per mile, over a vehicle's lifetime, multiple funding scenarios depending on what's available at your state or local or utility incentives, what your infrastructure costs look like, things like that. Some amount of market forecasting to really determine what options you have for procurement. And vehicle replacements are by model. And so you'll be shown what a replacement internal combustion or gas or diesel vehicle would cost you, and then you also will see the electric option as well. And you can also see greenhouse gas emission savings projections as well. Next slide. The tool comes with a wide variety of settings that you can tweak within the tool. So you can set your fuel pricing and other economic factors. You can choose the strategy you'll use for charging the vehicles, how much that charging infrastructure is going to cost you. You can set your purchase terms, apply incentives, modify your maintenance and insurance costs, and forecast out what the future might look like. Next slide. So far, a lot of folks have used the Drive tool, which we'd love to see. The tool has assessed over 1.4 million vehicles so far across more than 2,700 fleets, with many new features added on a rolling basis. And then we often do presentations like this to get the word out on the tool. Next slide. So a couple things here on the operations of the tool. It only runs on Windows through Macro Excel, and so you can't use it on a Mac, but it'll work pretty well with Windows. The data is automatically pulled from federal sources, so Federal Highway Administration, DOE, EPA, and other sources like that. New versions are released quarterly, so if bugs pop up or folks want to see a new feature, again, that does get updated consistently throughout the year. And it only analyzes on-road vehicles. So a lot of options for heavy duty, medium duty, light duty vehicles, but you won't be seeing things like golf carts in this tool. Next slide. All right, so how are we seeing fleets put this to work? Next slide. We see fleets use this kind of across the board. You can use it to learn about available EV options and replacements, since new vehicles are always coming online, and the tool pulls from a national data set. So new vehicles are continually posted to the tool. Perhaps the biggest draw of this tool is that you can understand your savings that you might see from procuring EVs. As you may know, EVs often have a higher MSRP, which contributes to maybe the thought that EVs are too expensive. But when you really take into account all of the costs across a vehicle's lifetime, it can show EVs as more affordable than their internal combustion counterparts. There is a function within the tool that will rank your vehicles in order of purchase to see the highest savings. So it can help fleets create a list to prioritize which vehicles maybe make the most sense to electrify first. The tool also generates a report with high-level information in addition to the more detailed dashboard that you can share to your leadership for buy-in, for them to take a look and see what those savings actually look like, have some nice graphs. It's a very reader-friendly format that this pulls. And finally, we do see fleets using the Drive tool as the basis of a fleet electrification plan. Next slide. So, Drive tool in action. In previous and current work, we've seen and we've helped with the Drive tool usage in a number of ways. So Charlotte, North Carolina, implemented an EV first procurement policy with some input from the Drive tool as well. And they have since procured 18 fully electric transit buses in addition to other vehicles as well, which is fantastic to see. And then Des Moines, Iowa is another one we've worked with. And the Drive tool explains how the city was able to save $7,700 per unit purchased. And it offered practical solutions to EV fleet deployment in a colder climate. So we've worked with lots of other cities, just like Charlotte and Des Moines, across the country. We've also worked on electrification roadmaps. And so we've implemented the Drive tool within that for entities like Washington, D.C., U.S. Virgin Islands, other folks like that. Generally, we really see fleets using the Drive tool to inform those near-term EV purchase decisions and vehicle end-of-life internal evaluations. And we also support an organization called Drive EV Fleets, which is a procurement opportunity through Sourcewell. for public fleets. And so once you kind of know what you want to buy through the Drive tool, Drive EV fleets can get you a better price through cooperative purchasing contracts. Next slide. So a bit more about Drive EV fleets, because I know there's a fair number of public fleets who could potentially benefit from this. Like I said, it's a partnership of ours. We work with Sourcewell, and it really leverages the collective buying power of United States public fleets to accelerate fleet electrification. And so you can have a lot of resources here, but the main benefit is it has those cooperative purchasing contracts for EVs already in place that you can benefit from. More information can be found at driveevfleets.org. All right, next slide. Okay, now I'm going to take a minute to walk through the tool. Next slide. So this is what the Drive tool looks like when you first launch it. This is a starting screen. The first time you go through the tool, you'll select the New Fleet button. Next, Heather. Perfect. Times after that, you can open a fleet you've previously used and saved within the tool, which I'll explain how to do. But when you first get in there, you'll do that New Fleet. Okay, next. So here's the screen where you'll open your fleet. Next, I think. Yep. But there's also sample data you can use if you are just playing around with the tool, getting a feel for it. So that's that other button there. But once you've selected your data, you will go ahead and hit the next button, next, and next again. So this is the fleet mapping screen where you can make changes to how the tool has mapped each type of vehicle in your fleet. You can edit the make and model, cost, and other items listed here for either the baseline replacement vehicle. And so that is the ICE or an internal combustion engine, gas, diesel car that the tool assumes you would replace a vehicle in your fleet with. Or you can also edit the electric alternative vehicle, which is the EV it's suggesting you would use as a replacement. So you see here on the list is the list of types of vehicles in the fleet. We've selected a Toyota Corolla. The tool assumes you would replace a existing Toyota Corolla with another gas Toyota Corolla, or the electric alternative is that Model 3. So once you have made your changes or are happy with what the Drive tool has done, you can click Save Processed Fleet. Next, Heather. And so that you can skip to this step next time you open the tool. You don't have to re-upload your fleet. And next again, Heather. So then you click the next button to proceed. Next. So this is where you can make specifications for the tool to take into account. So these are a lot of the settings I talked through earlier. For this presentation, I'm just going to give us a look at the charging infrastructure settings. Next. Next again. Here you can customize the type of chargers you'll use. So level 2, DC fast chargers, etc. The cost of these chargers, any available incentives, your ownership strategy, things like that. Once you've completed that, you can click Save. Next, Heather. And then that will return you to the settings page. Yep, exactly. So once you're good with all your settings, you are going to want to hit a button that says Export Analysis Settings. Next. And that will allow you to pull these settings back in the next time you get to this step without having to go through each setting category again. So it's just kind of allows you to save some time next time you come in here. Then you'll click the Run Analysis button. Next. And it might take a little bit of time, especially if your fleet's on the larger side, but it will eventually get you to a results page. So next. I already showed you kind of the summary dashboard earlier on in this presentation. So this one is a little bit more nitty-gritty, as you can see. It's another tab in the results dashboard. So in the report, this is the vehicle summary tab. And this page shows the one-to-one comparison of your savings if you go with the recommended EV in place of the recommended ICE vehicle. So to explain further, I'm going to look at one vehicle on this list, that Toyota Corolla again. Next. You can see here that it lists the vehicle's net present value, CPM and original pricing. But you can also you'll see the replacement recommendation with the Tesla Model 3 for this one. And going across the line here, you can see that if you were to choose the Tesla Model 3 instead of a new gas Toyota Corolla, you would see a 6.1% savings over the vehicle's lifetime. Next. Another piece of the results that I'll show you, and again, there are a lot of tabs in this report that you could click through and see a lot of detail about your specific fleet, is these charging infrastructure results. So this page will show your needs by location and charging level, and you can see it broken out here by these various locations, and then each one, what levels of charging and how many are needed. And next. That's all that I have today on the Drive tool. So thank you very much. And back to you, Heather.
Thank you, Emily. And actually, Emily, there was one question that came in that I think is just a clarifying question that I think it would be good to go and answer. Someone wanted to know where is the where on the Drive evfleets.org website is the tool. I assume that they meant the Drive tool. So where can people find the Drive tool if they want to download it?
Yes, the Drive tool can be found on electrificationcoalition.org, and I'll go pull the exact URL and stick it in the chat. So it'd be found on our website at the EC. I'll pull that in the chat in a moment here.
Okay, thank you. And now I will turn it over to Andy Burnham from Argonne National Labs. And I'm going to stop sharing because I'm going to let him share.
Okay, hopefully you're able to see my screen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this webinar. I will be speaking about the A-Fleet tool and how to analyze the costs and benefits of alternative fuel vehicles for your fleet. A-Fleet started out as a spreadsheet and has expanded significantly in the past 12 years to a suite of tools. So there still is a more detailed spreadsheet, but there is a user-friendly online interface, as well as some sub-tools that are based on A-Fleet for kind of differing purposes. Both the heavy-duty vehicle emissions calculator and A-Fleet CFI have been developed for specific funding programs. So HDVEC was part of kind of the VW funding, and A-Fleet CFI was part of the DOT's charging and fueling infrastructure program. So I'm going to talk through how A-Fleet can be used for you to look at your current fleet, identify some key metrics that you're interested in analyzing, and finding what alternative fuels may be fit with your operations. So the A-Fleet tool covers light duty, heavy duty, and off-road vehicles for petroleum use, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutant emissions, and cost of ownership. Off-road or kind of non-road space is an area that we have been focusing on more. I think probably for this audience, maybe not as of interest, but off-road includes kind of small engine type equipment like lawn and garden to larger things like forklifts or even construction equipment. We've also added some other kind of not off-road, it's called non-road, which I'll talk about a little bit later. For the metrics that we do look at, we're looking at petroleum use, greenhouse gas emissions, air pollutant emissions, as well as cost of ownership. Our focus, as the tool was developed for the Department of Energy's Technology Integration Program, supporting the Clean Cities and Communities network, we cover not just one or two fuels. We are trying to cover as wide a range of alternative fuels and advanced powertrains as possible. So when we're doing analyses, we're starting with a baseline fuel, so either gasoline kind of for light duty, diesel for heavy duty, but then looking at hybrids of both, plug-in electrics, so battery electric vehicles, and then alternative fuels, so CNG, LNG, so natural gas, propane, hydrogen, and biofuels like ethanol, biodiesel, and renewable diesel. The tool is updated annually. We just released a new version in January and have a webinar that kind of goes through the updates there. You can find kind of all the tools, sub-tools at this site. So I'm going to go into a little more detail of what you can do with first the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the most detailed. It has expanded over the past number of years as we get more questions about features. So similar to what Emily was talking about is like, well, people are asking for this calculation or that calculation, and we kind of put it under the umbrella of AFleet where you can kind of do that. The first kind of calculator that I talk about is Simple Payback. This covers both on-road and off-road vehicles. And the idea is you can get a years of payback or even miles of payback for an alternative fuel technology versus your gasoline and diesel baseline. It does include emissions calculations as well. So it's not just a cost calculator, it is an emissions calculator as well. Similarly, there's a total cost of ownership calculator only for on-road vehicles at this point. It kind of covers similar to what Emily was talking about, getting into the details of all the costs, while Simple Payback is really focusing on primarily the incremental cost of the vehicle plus fuel and maintenance, while total cost of ownership includes insurance and other fees that may come about. We have an idle reduction calculator, both for light duty and heavy duty applications. So for light duty in your fleet, you may have, say, your municipal fleet with a significant amount of police vehicles that are idling. You can look at that type of idle reduction. For heavy duty vehicles, similarly, like you can look at technologies that may be available for work trucks, but it also includes things for like Class 8 freight vehicles as well. We have footprint calculators that cover kind of on-road and off-road. These are typically the most used and popular versions of the calculators within this spreadsheet. You are entering information on your fleet, specifically in inventory, line by line, vehicle by vehicle, copying and pasting from your maybe existing software into this spreadsheet to get really a footprint of the emissions of kind of the existing fleet. And that can help you kind of in those previous steps when you're trying to do a comparison of alternative fuels. You can identify which of your equipment is kind of the highest emitting, the sustainability factors related to them. We've also added two new footprint calculators. First is the rail fleet footprint calculator, and the second is the marine fleet footprint calculator. As this is probably not your main focus, I won't spend a lot of time, but we are expanding kind of our capabilities with different types of vehicles and we say locomotives and ships to do emissions calculations. And in the future, we're going to be adding kind of cost capabilities as well for those types of vehicles. And then kind of some very specific calculators. We have an EV utility rate calculator. So one of the challenges of kind of electric vehicles is the cost of charging, especially as you think about it at a fleet level and the potential for demand charges as you think about maybe higher power charging potentially. It really depends on your rate, and rates vary quite significantly between areas. So one is to have a capability to choose a specific utility a specific rate and then do calculations to see, okay, this is a time of use rate. If I'm charging during the kind of peak hours, let's say from noon to 5 p.m., I'm paying 20 cents per kilowatt hour and my demand charge is $6 per kilowatt. While if I look at the off-peak time, it's 5 cents per kilowatt hour and there is no demand charge, right? So that information is really crucially important to really understand what your costs will be. In the spreadsheet, we focus on kind of the major utilities in each state, but then we have an online version that has a much broader coverage. Kind of stepping from that, just kind of the rate portion of the cost of charging, we can take that, the rate part, but we can also add the cost of installing an EVSE and the actual cost of the EVSE, as well as maintaining and operating it, to get a total cost of charging or levelized cost of charging for your electric vehicle fleet. We have cases for residential, so maybe a consumer case. We have fleet cases looking at specific types of fleets, what the cost might be. And then we also have public charging as well to do scenarios analysis of that. And then finally is the charging and fueling infrastructure calculator. I mentioned this a little bit in the kind of suite of tools that we have with the interest of kind of estimating the benefits of installing a charger or any alternative fuel refueling infrastructure. The question was like, well, what are those emissions benefits? How do I compare those? And we developed a methodology to do that for kind of funding programs as well as others to kind of estimate the potential benefits. The benefits really come from the use of the vehicle, so it becomes assumptions related to what vehicles are you fueling and what vehicles are you displacing. Because there is a significant amount of data, is a data hungry process to do cost analysis, to do emissions analysis, I'd like to highlight some of the key data sources. For a lot of the emissions related information, we rely on an internal model called the GREET model, which is a life cycle analysis tool to help give the kind of greenhouse gas emissions, energy consumption factors for this wide range of vehicle and fuel types. The idea here is that we can look at the operation of a vehicle and look at the environmental impacts and say, okay, coming out my tailpipe, I have a certain amount of NOx and PM, certain amount of air pollution, I have a certain amount of greenhouse gas emissions, I use a certain amount of fuel. But as we compare to alternative fuels, so electric vehicles is a good example, we have no emissions coming from the tailpipe, but we do have emissions potentially coming from the power plant that is generating that electricity. So putting these fuels and vehicles on an apples to apples basis requires to expand kind of our window of like what we're considering is relevant to the kind of emissions of a vehicle. And so in this graphic, you can kind of see for a gasoline vehicle, you have drilling a well, pumping the oil out, transporting that oil to a refinery, refining the fuel into a product that you can use in your vehicle like gasoline or diesel, and then transporting that to a refueling station. So that's kind of the example of what we're talking about when we think about this life cycle type of approach. Another question that I'm asked often is, well, I'm interested in electric vehicles, but what about the battery? Isn't there a lot of emissions coming from producing the materials to produce, let's say, a lithium-ion battery for a large electric vehicle? And so our team has developed kind of the emissions footprint of materials that go into not just the battery, but all the components of the body, the chassis of all types of vehicles, so that you can, again, add this apples to apples comparison and look at that specific question. So that is the capability that you have in this tool. We also include emissions from the EPA MOVES model. That is a great resource for gasoline and diesel emissions coming from the tailpipe, but we have to supplement that with other emissions data from Argonne modeling, because they do not focus as much on biofuels and natural gas vehicles and propane vehicles. Next is fuel price. So fuel price is really important. I talked a little bit in detail about the complications around electric vehicle pricing. Similarly, you have the geographical difference of fuel prices. And so we have default state level pricing, both for public stations and private stations where we have information for them. Typically, we have more public than private, but we do see for certain fuels, natural gas being a good example, propane another, that when you're able to lock in a fuel contract long term, the kind of amortize the cost of the fuel per gallon is going to be much lower than it is at a public fueling station. So you would be able to see that. But we highly recommend, like for these types of data inputs, that you enter your own data. If you have better information, that's going to make your analysis much more specific, accurate to your scenario. How many miles do you travel? The incentives that you may be eligible for. Those are really crucially important. And finally, some of these kind of total cost of ownership, additional types of costs, depreciation, maintenance, repair, insurance. I was part of a study that was a lot of national labs looking at this question to try to provide, a best available information for both light duty and heavy duty kind of costs. And so we dug into these different types of costs, and you can see in this chart a little bit of like the level of information of comparing for light duty vehicles the cost of an ICEV, kind of conventional ICE vehicle, to a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, to a battery electric. This data is better available for light duty. Heavy duty is not as available. There are some sources for transit buses. So this is an example of, like, we provide some defaults because maybe, this would be a hard data point to find if you're stuck, like, coming up with this analysis yourself. But it's something to consider, is like, well, I want to think about this conservatively and say, well, the maintenance assumption is, say, whatever, 10 cents a mile in this example. But the battery electric is 6 cents, so a 40% reduction. But I'm a little concerned. I don't think, we're going to be able to get those types of savings. We're going to be putting a lot of this out, contracting out a lot of the maintenance to third party potentially, or whatever it might be. I'm going to change my assumption and assume it's going to be at parity with an ICE vehicle. So those are some of the knobs that you can twist when you're trying to think about your type of analysis here. I'm going to go through the A-Fleet Online tool, because I think when we kind of think about a user coming into A-Fleet, I kind of went through like all these different calculators, and it kind of can be a little bit overwhelming depending on your level of comfort with a spreadsheet. That's why we created this online interface to be able to kind of point and click, have a user walk through these calculators. We are expanding kind of our online tools somewhat in parallel, but typically a little bit behind our spreadsheet. So we're adding, we see 5 of the calculators, of 5 of the 10 roughly are online. So I'm going to go through the TCO demo and kind of see how you enter the data. This is very similar to the payback type calculators as well. You're going to be selecting which vehicle type you're going to be interested in analyzing. Here I chose school buses, your state, the number of vehicles, and then here are some of the parameters that I think are important for you to consider, that while we give you defaults, please update if you have better information. So mileage, years of ownership. And then things like fuel economy, that might be challenging, especially for like school buses. You may have your own default information for your buses in this example, but you may not know what the EV one will be. So this is going to provide at least a starting point to kind of do your work. The purchase price doesn't include any incentives, so you would need to like adjust that as need be. It's maintenance as well. I talked about that. As you kind of check the vehicles that you're interested in on the right-hand side of the panel, the results will immediately pop up for the costs and the emissions that you can look. And then as you kind of go through your different assumptions, so now I'm on the fuel price tab, you can see like as I change maybe the default fuel price from $3.96 per gallon for diesel, I can kind of do some scenarios for $3 and $4 and adjust those parameters to kind of see the sensitivity to kind of the cost of ownership. Some of the other costs that you can adjust include some of the, whether you're taking out a loan in those terms, some of the insurance details, as well as fees like license and registration. And then finally, for emissions related analysis, we have kind of the types of fuels that you select. They kind of show up dynamically in this pane. So here we have, again, propane, biodiesel, B20, and EV selected. So you see some of the, like, where are those fuels coming from? So for biodiesel, you can choose whether it's what the feedstock is. Is it soy? Is it canola? Propane, an important factor. Is it, fossil-based propane, or is it some renewable type? And then electricity, we are, going to give you the grid mix. So depending on where you are in the country, you are selecting a specific location, but you can go and customize that and say, well, actually, I know from my specific utility, we have, this utility mix of 75% renewable and 25% natural gas. You can go and adjust that. And then finally on this kind of sheet here, or this page here, you can see the kind of petroleum use, greenhouse gas, air pollutant options. So that gets to the point that I was making about like, what is your window of emissions analysis? You can look at kind of tailpipe air pollutant emissions. You can look at including a broader scope of like producing the fuel. And then you can also look at the emissions for producing the vehicle, that battery example that I gave. Finally, you can export your results to a spreadsheet, save them, share those with both kind of the inputs and the outputs so that you can have that as you kind of like work through the tool. That is my last slide, and I appreciate if there's any questions, happy to be able to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So we are going to move ahead to the Q&A portion. Feel free to enter in any questions that you have into either the chat or the Q&A box. And I know that I have a few questions prepared. And so, so one of the questions that I had prepared is, and I think this is probably going to be, this is relevant for everyone, I think. So one of the things that I do when I'm working with a fleet and doing a fleet assessment is I'll often, early on in the process, I'll, send them an email that basically lays out, hey, here, this is the data that we're going to need in order to go and complete this process, so that they have time to think through, like, do they know that? Where do they need to go and find that data? When using your tools or participating in your programs, what's some of the data that people should be trying to go and gather together ahead of time before using your tool?
I can kick it off for the drive tool. Like I think I mentioned, you definitely want your VINs for each vehicle. That's like the one thing you need absolutely to run the drive tool. It's also really helpful to have average annual vehicle miles traveled for each vehicle. You can put in a default number if you would just like to do that in the tool, but it's nice to have your actual numbers for your fleet. And then same thing for your expected lifetime in the fleet in years for each vehicle. Again, you can enter a default, but it's helpful to have your actual numbers in the fleet. So those are the kind of like the three key things that we really need to run a drive analysis.
I can follow up. So similar, we're not doing VIN level analysis with A-Fleet, but the vehicle miles traveled is a crucial assumption. So the type of activity that you're doing is really important, because if you are, pushing the range of a EV, or kind of the cost savings really is that kind of per mile, as Emily was showing on one of her slides. And if the incremental cost is very significant, you really need to know like how much activity you're doing. So a generic default is not necessarily going to give you a very accurate result potentially. I think outside of that, understanding kind of any incentives that you're potentially are eligible for, that's an important one when you're doing a cost analysis. I would say the other thing for like emissions is just making sure you kind of, if you have an idea like, hey, I'm interested in natural gas vehicles and I want to do some sustainability, knowing whether it's going to be fossil natural gas or renewable natural gas is an important factor. So I think those are some of the key things that will help you kind of get more accurate results.
We did have a question from the audience, and I think, Andy, this will be for you. For A-Fleet, is there a limit to the size of fleet? After a certain size, is it better to use another tool?
So we have the capability to add as many rows for the footprint analysis as A-Fleet or as Excel can handle. That's going to give you a starting point that will tell you, the emissions kind of on a vehicle level, and then we'll roll it up to say all the school buses in your fleet. So you can roll it up in that way. When you want to do like a comparison, I think, what Drive does really well is handles maybe diverse fleets in an analysis all at once. A-Fleet kind of looks at, you want to group the vehicles and say like, okay, hey, we're going to replace these 10 F-150 trucks in our next cycle. And we want to look at the options for those 10 vehicles. Hopefully they're going to be operating very similarly. So it's, again, kind of that challenge. Like if you have one vehicle that's driving 2,000 miles and another that's driving 12,000, the answer is going to be different, right? So you do need to kind of consider that heterogeneity, but like, is your fleet really, is the operations really diverse? And then how much do I want to get into that? Where A-Fleet, you could kind of bound it and say, okay, well, our min and our max kind of it's bimodal. We have a lot that drive a little bit, we have a lot that drive a lot. We can do two scenarios and get a good like range of answers, but there may be other tools. So I would say like Drive is really, again, good for electric, but when you're trying to think about other fuels, I don't know that there's another tool that can handle that kind of challenging diversity of fleet type question for anything other than electric, personally. So, yeah.
And then the next question that I have, so if someone is so someone's listening to this webinar and they're thinking about potentially doing a fleet assessment, and they're thinking about their staff and kind of who they should put on this task, at least to start. What are some of the skills that you recommend that you think are useful in terms of being able to use your tools and interpret them well? And I guess as a follow-up question, have you seen people, and I'm saying this because I know that people often want to do this. Have you seen people successfully use student workers or interns in terms of like doing this sort of work, at least as a start?
For the drive tool, definitely. We've seen communities, other fleets have, you know, their summer fellow or whoever successfully run drive analyses. I would say the main thing is just like attention to detail, making sure you have all the information, and then patience to like figure out exactly what settings you want to tweak, and knowing who to ask to get the information. But the drive tool is really designed to be pretty user friendly, so anyone can use it, as long as they have that fleet information. We also have a user guide that's available on the website where you download the drive tool from. And that user guide should be able to answer most questions folks would have in throughout the moving through the tool. So definitely, yeah, put your interns on it. Be great.
Yeah, similar response that for the Clean Cities and Communities programs that we are supporting, they have interns oftentimes being the key point person to do fleet analysis for the coalitions. And what kind of information they need is similar, that you do need kind of that support potentially, like if you're either inside or outside the fleet, to have a little bit of fleet information. You want like things to be accurate, so you want the fleet information. I think some things to think through when you're thinking about sustainability goals is what are, you know, your organization's goals. Like if you're talking about like, hey, we want to reduce emissions, okay, like that could be too generic of a ask for someone who's like stepping into this and like, okay, well, it reduces some of these emissions, but then some of these other ones, you know, the greenhouse gas emissions are lower, but the air pollutant are higher. Well, how do I think through that? So I think some guidance on kind of sustainability metrics can be helpful, just having a sense of it. But the use of the tool is similar. You know, the spreadsheet is relatively straightforward. It does take a little bit of navigation to know where you need to be. We have a user guide as well. But that was why we created the online interface, to be able to kind of step through without a lot of need to be so well versed in kind of the step-by-step process, just make it as simple as possible. So yeah, interns definitely can work on it.
Thank you. And so, next question I have. So when you're balancing the decision about whether to hire a fleet consultant versus doing the analysis in-house, how do you recommend balancing that? So, like, are these tools, do you see people using these a lot as kind of initial preparation before bringing in a consultant? Like, kind of, what are some of the things you recommend people think about when they're thinking about, oh, I should try and do this myself, or oh, I should go and hire someone to do it?
Yeah, I think we see drive tool as a lot of times used as that initial foray into fleet electrification, especially if you have like a dedicated staff person who can take the time to collect all the information and plug it into the tool and roll through it. And so if you have that intern, that summer fellow, that staff person who has the time, like I think absolutely start with the drive tool, figure out, you know, what those results look like. Does this make sense to you? And then you're more prepared to then go hire your fleet consultant and really interact with them on what you need out of your next fleet analysis. So definitely using it as a baseline. That said, if you have a lot of really unique use cases, if you have a lot of, like Andy was talking about, off-road or non-on-road vehicles, like the drive tool doesn't do those. So then maybe you go to a fleet, you go to a fleet consultant, whatever that looks like. I will say, maybe Brian's about to say it, like Charging Smart is a great program to kind of take that next step outside of the drive tool in-house. But yeah, definitely use drive tool and use it as a baseline to go from there.
I'll just add, you know, from our perspective at the local government level, and maybe this is applicable to other fleet operators as well, but you know, we're working with a variety of community sizes. So on the low end, we have the city of Mebane in North Carolina, which has 20,000 residents and a pretty small fleet, all the way up to the city of Raleigh, where I live, which is roughly 500,000 people, a very large fleet. The city of Raleigh has already completed their own comprehensive fleet analysis with a consulting group. So it may depend on the size of the fleet, where Mebane can probably get by on information they can glean from Drive. Other cities or larger fleets might want to call in additional assistance.
Yeah, I would say A-Fleet's in the same boat of like initial, like it's meant for someone to kind of get, I don't say their feet wet, but kind of get an initial understanding of what the costs, the benefits are of, these different technologies. It's not going to substitute for necessarily like a more detailed analysis of all the implications that are kind of beyond, say initial costs and initial emissions, like, is this vehicle right for my application, may include factors of it's, making sure the range and like the duty cycle is appropriate. Am I going to have to build any infrastructure? Like those become really, bigger investments, bigger questions. I would point to Clean Cities and Communities as an organization that you can reach out to, maybe pre-consultant potentially, to reach out to someone, to an organization that has experience in helping people navigate this kind of potentially difficult question of like, hey, we want to work on this, an alternative fuel, sustainable fuel. We want to reduce emissions. But we want to also like make sure our costs are coming down as well. They can help kind of bring partners together to help maybe find funding. They can help, help find other fleets who've been in the same boat and like can say like, yeah, they can either champion this fuel or this kind of experience. So I think trying to find, additional help beyond kind of the initial tool analysis can be really crucial in making a good decision.
So I'm not seeing any other questions from the audience. We can give it like 30 seconds, see if anyone puts anything in the chat or the Q&A. But not hearing anything. I think we should end the webinar. And I want to thank all of our participants for taking part. I want to thank April at NAFA for helping to pull this all together. And I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you, Heather. Have a good day, everyone.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.